Well, first, thank you so much for being on my session. I am being at heart a classroom teacher. I'm used to speaking to large groups, but typically they're staying in the session because I'll call their mothers if they leave. So it's really flattering to have people come willingly to something that I am presenting, and I appreciate that. The second thing I know about presenting is I've often done that with teachers. And if you're going to present to teachers, you need to have something to say, and you need to do it efficiently. So we'll get started here. And I want to talk for just a moment about the broader topic we'll be addressing, the framework we're going to be using to have this conversation, and then we'll dive right in. Today we're going to be talking about piggybacking. And I don't think that's a technical term in fabrication yet, but hopefully we can make it so down the line. Through my experiences, I have used this technique to bring digital fabrication and making ethos into spaces where it wasn't found naturally. And I hope that by the end of our conversation today, you can adapt some of the experiences I've had for your own situation in bringing all the wealth and richness of digital fabrication and making into traditional educational spaces. To do this, what we're going to be doing is I'm going to talk about 3 different settings where I've used piggybacking. And after each setting, we will pause, and Alethea is going to toss some of your questions at me. And I would ask you to please ask those questions in the comments, which I can't see, but she will throw those at me in our little breaks as we go. And then at the very end, any questions that we have time that we haven't had time to address, we'll try to get those, all of them at the end. So I appreciate your patience there. And I should say, this is a conversation, not a presentation. Any type of, the first thing you have to know when going into schools is you have to be relevant to the setting, to the subject area, to the teacher, and to the students. And relevance starts with being flexible and with knowing that there is no one solution to every situation. So we want to make sure today we have plenty of time for you to bounce questions back and forth that pertain, questions about what I've done in the past, but also questions about your specific situation and how things might be addressed. So with no further ado, I'm going to attempt to flip slides. Here we go. There it goes. Whoops. There we go. It was delayed. And here we go. So who am I? Why should you listen to me? Well, it's not because of this accent, that's for sure. I've spent about 20 years in education, 17 of those as a classroom educator, primarily in public schools. I directed the Gilbert Innovation Hub, which was a really unique opportunity to put basically a Fab Lab light in the heart of a Title I public elementary school, and to integrate that with the curriculum of the school. After that, I served as the manager of instruction for a mobile Fab Lab in Boston called the GE Brilliant Career Lab. And most recently, I was an educator at St. Martin's Episcopal School in New Orleans, Louisiana, where I consulted with their Gibbs Family Center for Innovation and Design program, and worked with their mobile Fab Lab, as well as being a classroom teacher. Currently, I am consulting and trying to do what I've really found is the heart and my mission for the rest of my career as an educator, which is to help others in both the fabrication and making communities and in the education communities, to build a bridge between those so they can get the best out of each other And that is at the heart of the presentation you're going to see today. Now, before we get started with the core of what I want to say, I want to tell you I am biased. And instead of trying to hide it, I'm going to tell you outright. I am a classroom educator. I have a distinct bias for traditional education. And while I love and am close and am wrapped up in Fab Foundation and the Fab mission and making, I want to see all of the positives of the making movement come to fruition in actual traditional classrooms. And this is kind of my statement to that effect, if I can get my, I apologize. Oh, yeah, these things are a little delayed. So this is my statement. I believe that any serious effort to leverage the making movement and Fab Labs for education must start and end where we find the preponderance of students and teachers on any given day, and that is schools. By starting, I mean serving as a catalyst to change the way students learn in classrooms. And by ending, I mean creating the first generation of educators which use making as their modus operandi for teaching. I think in my heart that if we really want to leverage what we know as fabricators and makers for the greater good, we cannot do that without having our, at least part of our mission to interact with schools. That is where the vast majority of students are located. That is where the vast majority of educators are located. And that is where the vast majority of our future is located. If we really want to change the conversation for how things are done in the future, it starts where the future is taught, and that is our schools. And switch the slide. Okay, so piggybacking. This is kind of a silly metaphor, but it actually has more substance than you would think. Here in the United States, this is piggybacking on the right, where a child and a parent need to get somewhere quicker, and the parent says, "Jump on my back," and off they go. That is piggybacking. What's on the left is piggybacking where my family is from, in the rural community. Pig jumps on the back of an older pig. But for what we're talking about today, piggybacking means how do smaller Fab Labs, smaller organizations, they have a real heart for education, how do they expand their impact by partnering with larger, more traditional education institutions? And I don't want you to think from these pictures that Fab Labs are children. They aren't. They are new, they're innovative, but they often do not have the massive resources or bandwidth it takes to truly impact thousands of students on their own. School systems are made to do that. And I don't want the picture of an adult to come across as school systems have it all figured out. They don't. In their, by nature, being such large, ponderous organizations meant to serve thousands of students over the course of 180 days a year, they do not have a lot of flexibility, and they don't have a lot of time to innovate. So both sides of this equation have a lot to offer each other. And when coupled together, I think real difference can be made. And we're trying to make the slides too. Okay, so here's my experience, and this is where we'll start our conversation today. I was a classroom educator for 16 years, and in history and science and many other subjects. But I was always piddling in the background, trying new things. And that's how I came to bump up against all types of technology, but specifically digital fabrication, just on my own. Close to where I was teaching in Chattanooga, Tennessee, a very innovative principal of a Title I elementary school decided that the best way to impact his students was to create an innovation hub in the heart of the school that was going to help teachers and help students create new ways to learn. And he hired me to come in and create this space and be its leader. That is kind of the story behind how I got into, or how I became a bridge for formal education and the making community. I want to talk about how we piggybacked at this school. And this is my situation, but I want you to be thinking as I'm talking about what happened here at Gilbert Elementary School, how in spaces that you know around your Fab Lab or in your educational spaces, where are the places where you and another organization could work together in some way to enhance the overall reach of what you're trying to do. Here at Gilbert, when we talk about piggybacking, one of the first things you see is we took over the library space. And you know, when we talk about piggybacking earlier, we're talking about organizations, but when you arrive in a situation, piggybacking can be a lot more than just the organizations that are involved. It's also the assets that you have available. In an elementary school, the largest area in the school, other than the gym, is the library. So if you're really trying to create a space that you can maximize and is a place where all students are welcome, it's the library, and that's what we did. You can see our makerspace there. That was a book closet. You can see out the door there, the bookshelves, the library was still functional. They hired me using the librarian money. I was officially the librarian, but I knew nothing about being a librarian. They leveraged a teacher aide to be my assistant and do all the book work with checking out books and checking in books to leave me to run the space. This is an example of piggybacking. If we would have had one small classroom in one wing of the school, this would not have been as effective. It was in the center of the school, and it was a space large enough where we could host several different classes of students, often at the same time, where we could have room to grow and bring in larger and larger devices and more of them, and space for the students to really spread out and make things. Now, human capital is also part of piggybacking. If you're going to go into any public school, any private school, you cannot accomplish your mission without piggybacking on the human capital they have available. And the first is students. If you cannot harness the students as part of your mission and get them on board, you will fail. There's just no way around it. You have to engage the students. And secondly, if you do not engage the teachers, they are the gateways to the students. They will never come to your space unless they have the teacher's permission. So you have to be relevant to the teachers also. And that brings me, if I can flip to the next slide here. Hold on. There we go. Okay, so we're going to see this scene or this screen multiple times today during the conversation. I believe that there are 4 things that the making movement and Fab Labs can bring to education. The first is relevance, and that hooks back into students and teachers. If you do not have some relevant something to offer to what they need, you can forget about it. You will never get the time, the resources, the space to really enact your mission as a maker or as a Fab Lab administrator. You're not going to get that. So the first, we think about hearts and minds, the first people you have to convince are the teachers. You have to have something relevant to say to them and their mission. And when I came to Gilbert, the first thing I did was go to the teachers in their classrooms and find out, what are you teaching? I cannot ask teachers to give up their teaching time to come to me so that I can show a student how to use a 3D printer. That's not part of the curriculum. They can't waste their time on something that I think is cool at a cost to their mission as classroom teachers. So I first sourced what were the teachers teaching and what was the curriculum at the school. At that point, it came back to me to figure out how my machines and my assets in the Innovation Hub could serve their needs. As fabricators, we have some cool gadgets, and we have a really unique ethos about what it means to make and create and innovate and iterate. But all of that is secondary when you walk into a school setting. It's important, and eventually they will see the value. But the first step is seeing the value in what the teachers are doing. When the teachers see that your machines are relevant to what they're teaching in the classroom, they will then open their classrooms for you to come in. And they will then give you access to their students to come do your programming. Which leads to the second thing, engagement. Great, you've convinced the teachers that you are going to align what you're doing with your 3D printers and your laser cutters and vinyl cutters, all those things, to what they're teaching in the classroom. But now when the students arrive, you better have something interesting and engaging for them to do. And so thankfully, as fabricators, we have some of the coolest and most amazing technology in the world. But it has to be, at that point, attuned to student interest. Otherwise, they're going to go back to their teachers. They're going to say, can we go to the playground instead? Can we read instead? Can we play with a device instead? And that's the only chance you're going to have with those students. So you have to be ready, and you have to be, you've got to have a lesson in place that can grab student attention. Empowerment is something else that we as a making movement and Fab Lab have to offer at the school level. And we'll talk more about that in my next slide. But the machines are empowerment. They're not fun. They're not cool. They're not great technology. They're not great career connections. They're none of that unless they are empowering to the students, the teachers, and the setting itself. All of the reasons that you or I think that those machines and our kind of mission as fabricators and as makers are cool don't mean anything unless they can empower the people we're working with and in their setting on their terms. So at Gilbert, I wanted to empower teachers after they've seen what the machines could do, after they could see that the students were engaged and excited about using them. I wanted to empower those teachers to then create lessons themselves and bring those machines into the classroom. I'm one person, and everyone here is just a single point of light in the greater constellation of making. But if we are to really impact as many students and as many educators as possible, we have to empower them to become part of our community and harness it for what they do on a day-to-day basis. If we can do those three things, then a school can be transformed on a system level. The school will see making and digital fabrication are methods to transform how we were doing education, and can enhance the instructional output. And you'll see in my next slide, if you can convince them that it can do the relevance, engagement, empowerment, it will transform the school, and it will transform how everyone in the school thinks about learning. And to me, that is our ultimate mission in making and in digital fabrication. It's to transform how people think about learning in educational spaces. Okay, so I'm going to try to switch slides here again. Give it just a moment. Oh, don't want to look at him. Okay, so my second stop was in Boston, Massachusetts, where I became the leader of a mobile Fab Lab in collaboration with a number of different people that are in and on this session today. And it was a real team effort. But this was a different type of opportunity. With the Brilliant Career Lab, we were taking a mobile Fab Lab to a variety of different schools, not just one school. And so our mission changed a little bit. This was not a mission to change any one school. This was a mission to show value to a system, to an entire school system. And it was an amazing adventure. And mobile fabrication has really stolen my heart. I think it is a great way to spread the gospel of digital fabrication and making. The way this mobile lab worked is we would arrive at a school and they would host us for a number of weeks. When we arrived at that school, we would do a number of just interest activities at lunches, on playgrounds, things like that, just to show off the devices and build engagement with the students. At the same time, I was meeting with teachers. And just like we did at the Gilbert iHub, I'm meeting with teachers and I'm asking them, what are you teaching now? And my job was to figure out how the devices in that trailer could help them teach it better, more engaging, and leave after the couple of weeks having the teacher feel like that he or she has accomplished the academic goals, while also giving students an introduction to some skills with digital fabrication tools that could help them chase out their own interests or to do schoolwork in new and innovative ways. We also had a emphasis on careers, so that students were now thinking about the future and realizing that the projects they were making for their classrooms and for their homework using digital fabrication tools were also the same processes they could use for entrepreneurship and for careers in a variety of different settings. So as you can see here with these pictures, we, especially on the right-hand side, you can see the young woman holding, we use a laser cutter to make working gliders. And she went a step beyond that. She used the laser cutter to make a working glider and then transformed it into a bird. So why did the teacher allow this to happen in their classroom over the course of 2 weeks? Simple. They were studying physics. And because the laser cutting and making of working airplanes connected with aerodynamics and gravity and drag, and all these science concepts, we were given full reign, so long as they could do both at the same time. And 2 weeks later, students walked out of the classroom having learned what they needed to learn content-wise, while learning what they also need to know in order to work a laser cutter. That is how partnership works, if it's going to be transformative. At the bottom, you can see a language arts class who was doing I believe it's a social justice unit. And instead of doing their projects traditionally with a report or a poster board or a diorama, they designed them with Inkscape and then laser cut them. At the heart of this is a very specific type of teaching called project-based learning. And it is the heartbeat of any efforts to transform instruction in schools using digital fabrication tools. When we talk about, now I'll move on to the next screen.
Ryan.
Oh yes, let me take a moment. Yeah.
Sorry. There's somebody, they're not here, but somebody else might have this question as well.
Sure.
But they were wondering, how do you cope with a 50-minute period? And I don't know if you're gonna get like into that more later and to
Sure.
save that question for later, or if you want to respond to that.
No,
now.
let's go now. I got so excited I forgot to pause there. So that's an excellent question. And I want to answer it now because when you're talking with educators, those of you who are fabricators in this meeting, when you're talking with educators, if you do not address the logistics of what you're telling them to do in the classroom, when they ask it, they will write you off because the logistics of the classroom are intense. And if you can't show them a plausible way to make this happen in their classrooms, then they're going to say, well, it's really cool. You have nice devices and great ideas, but this is just not practical. So when we talk about 50-minute classrooms or 50-minute periods in classrooms, that is a real challenge. And depending on the schools we went into, some were on block with 90 minutes, but many were on 50 minutes. And when you're looking at elementary and middle schools, most are on 50-minute periods. 50-minute periods necessitate project-based learning over the course of a 5-day period or a 5-day segment that you're in the classroom. And if you're, I've just recently wrote a post on Scopes DF, kind of giving a format for that where we use something called 5E, which is very prominent in schools, to do an explore, an engagement activity and an explore activity on day 1. We do a content connection on day 2, and then we do an explore activity on day 3, and then we have an evaluation activity on day 5. You have to get through, you've got to show that you can get through that 5-day process from beginning to end in order for teachers to say, okay, this 50-minute investment is worthwhile. The other thing that this person is also asking is, how do you fabricate them in 50 minutes? And the answer to that is, you don't. If you're talking about 3D printing specifically, that is a logistical problem that has to happen often outside the classroom. Depending on the sizes of classes, it requires small group work where groups work together on projects so that you're not trying to print something for every student, which I know is kind of gets us as fabricators. We want everyone to be able to make something. But what we're trying to do is empower them with the knowledge to where on their free time, outside of school and clubs, in comeback time after school day is over, they can return to those projects and be excited enough to do it on their own. I've been in many classrooms where we printed something for everyone, but that often required me, especially on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, to stay after school to make sure those projects got made. They created the files, they understood the process, but the logistical time for making them, it takes some planning. There's no doubt about it. I hope I answered that question. It is plausible, and that was one of the more powerful things about the mobile Fab Lab, is we're able to take that to schools and show them by being in their classrooms and rolling the machines into the classroom how this works, how you can format it, and how you can go from the beginning of the process to the end over the course of a week or two. Okay. So, and please ask questions, and Alicia, you interrupt me anytime you want. I
will, Brian. If I can answer some in the chat, I will do that.
Okay, sounds good. And Alicia, well, she knows everything that I've learned. We learned it together. We were the compatriots that made that first Fab Lab go. In fact, we're now going over to piggybacking. Okay, so if you're going to piggyback with a system, how do you do that? And systems, if we as makers and digital fabricators really want impact, we have to go into systems, not just individual schools, not just individual communities, but we have to grapple with systems, school systems. They teach the preponderance of the students in this country and probably most any other country. I will not say they're easy to work with. Part of piggybacking is learning two very different groups with different ideas about their missions, coming to see each other for their uniqueness and how they can help each other. But that does not mean they always agree. And when we went into Boston Public Schools, the first thing we did was go to the principals meeting and stand in front of them and say, cast our vision. This is what we want to do. This is why it's going to be relevant to your teachers. We are going to connect everything we do to the curriculum they're teaching. There will be no wasted time. And that makes principals sit up. When you can say everything we're doing is connected to something that's in our standard course of study, that's in the NGSS or whatever curriculum the school system is using, it shows you did your homework, that you value their time, and that you understand that they have a greater mission. And their mission is greater than ours because they have to educate kids in totality for what comes next. And being a part of that, we have to understand that we are not the biggest person in the room. We have to fill our role. And if we do it well, our role will expand. So when we think about relevance, there you go. You go to a school system, you got to say, look, we can do two things at the same time. We can be relevant to curriculum, and that will get teachers on your side. Looking down here. So once again, got to have engagement for students. And that comes from the project-based learning we talked about earlier. If you do not have a methodology for delivering instruction with digital fabrication machines and making ideas, then it doesn't work. That is very different from people coming to a Fab Lab and wanting to make something. They came there with a plan, or bringing students into a Fab Lab and saying, these devices can make something, go make something. That's great. And if you earn your laurels at the schools, they will give you that opportunity. But at the beginning, the engagement has to be connected to how things are done in classrooms. And that is through project-based learning. They have to be able to learn the curriculum while they are creating the project. And I would encourage everyone on the call, if you're not familiar with project-based learning, please do your homework. It is the methodology for really introducing and providing a means for these devices to get the time they deserve in classrooms. Empowerment. So I'm going to go down a list of things here that are so important that we as fabricators and as makers can bring to schools that they don't easily create for themselves. The first is equity. With a mobile Fab Lab or with some mobile aspect of your organization, you can go to the need. School systems in general have a harder time doing that. If they have a Fab Lab at one specific school, they cannot pick that Fab Lab up and move it to disadvantaged communities. A mobile Fab Lab or mobile aspects of a Fab Lab can go to the need. And Alethea and I, one of the things we told principals is we will go anywhere, anytime. We're not looking for your best darling students, and we're not looking for your best darling schools. We want to go anywhere, because in the end, the success of digital fabrication and making in schools is in the fact they can help anyone, any student from any background. And if that mission is accomplished, then yes, at that point we can say as a making and digital fabrication community, we have something to offer. Anyone can teach the best, the brightest, the most capable. Anyone can teach at the schools that are wealthy. Our mission is to be able to go anywhere, anytime. And back to my experience with the iHub at the elementary school, there was an aspect of that too. Even though I had a stationary space, early on, I had to make a cart that had some 3D printers or some type of making component and take it. And some teachers wouldn't let me into a classroom. Not because they were mean, they just didn't invite me. They had stuff to do. They weren't trying to insult me or anything. So I rolled the cart into the hallway in between classes and made stuff. And that brought me some engagement from the students. With the mobile Fab Lab that Alethea and I worked with, that was on steroids. Now we're able to take an entire Fab Lab, but it wasn't enough just to park it in the parking lot and say, come to us. That doesn't do anything for teachers. That's lost class time. We had to be able to take the devices off the lab and put it in their classroom and then integrate it with what they were already doing. And when you can do that, it gives you a leg up on equity. Anywhere, anytime, we're ready. Let's go. The second is careers and job skills. That's another thing that school systems struggle with because they have so much of an academic curriculum. Finding time to create job skills, and we can certainly do that with digital fabrication tools, does not come naturally. They're used to telling students what they need to know. They are not used to having students produce something that shows they understand the content. And that is what project-based learning is. And that is our the chink in the armor where we as fabricators and makers can find our way into schools and stay, is when we allow our tools to make projects that show that the students understand what they're learning in the class. Fundraising. Schools struggle to raise funds. Some of the wealthiest schools, you know, the reason they're wealthy is because they have parent organizations that can raise more money than the school down the street. So digital fabrication tools are a game changer for schools when it comes to fundraising. The students can make the things that they then will sell to the community to make money to buy more machines and to enhance the curriculum at the school and to really trick out their Fab Labs and make them better. So thinking about empowerment through the eyes of fundraising, that's another way for local Fab Labs and makers to be able to go to a school and say, you know, we can make t-shirts, we can laser cut glasses, we can do a wide variety of specialized projects that the school can then turn around and sell to the community and to their students to make money for the next stage in their plans. Personal goals. Curriculum is written for swaths of students in general, with very little thought at the state level or the national level for individuals. Digital fabrication and making is a very individual thing, and it allows students to create projects and to that are unique to them. And it allows students to take what they've learned about the machines and then make their own personal goals happen. School systems and schools in general struggle with that. They're better at broad strokes. Lastly, the prom. Every school, I see you waving at me. Every school needs has a prom, and they have to outsource all the things they need to make that happen. Plays, all these different extracurricular activities. Digital fabrication could be a game changer for those schools. They can bring it all in-house. Alethea.
Okay, so there was another question. It says, from Nathali, I'm sorry if I'm saying your name incorrectly. Do you feel that making, fabricating, and designing will ever become part of the curriculum in its own right, rather than complementing teaching in other areas of the curriculum? Do you think it should? And then also we have about 10-ish minutes left.
Got you. Okay, excellent. That's a great question. I think it will and it should become part of the curriculum, but I do not think that's going to happen until it can show value across the school, not just in certain subsets. When schools and school systems spend their money, and let's not kid each other, digital fabrication tools can be expensive. When they spend their money, they're looking for impact. And if they're only going to impact the kids who take that class, then that impact is very small. But if they can impact the kids who are taking the digital fabrication class, and they can impact fundraising, and they can impact careers, and they can impact equity, and those same machines can be farmed out to individual classes and students and across the curriculum for them to make their classroom projects, now you got a game changer. And now that cost and expense can be spread out over the whole school budget. And that's a big deal. And I also think that if in order for digital fabrication to really change society, it cannot be pigeonholed. It cannot be pigeonholed in science. It cannot be pigeonholed in making. It must have value to all people, no matter what they're teaching or learning or where they came from or what their personal goals are. We have to be able to show that it has broad appeal. I hope that answers your question. And that's a good segue into transformation for school systems. We were very fortunate. This is how Alethea and I knew we were successful at a school. When we left the school and then we perhaps came back a year later, they had adopted some of the methods that we used and used some of their precious funds to invest in digital fabrication machines. That's when you know you're being transformative. When they're changing the way they teach so that students will have a better, well, I don't know, it's better, yeah, it's a better way to learn. And that's when you know that that's validation for us as makers. If we can't make the argument well enough that a school will change the way they are approaching teaching, then we need to make a better argument. And we were very, very excited in our time in Boston with the Brilliant Career Lab. A number of schools, over half the schools we visited, a year later, had changed some part of how they did things to adopt some of the methods we were using. And change can be very slow in systems. So, you want to keep that rolling. When a system is looking to be transformative, you get a superintendent that really likes what you have to do, what you have to say about how digital fabrication can enhance learning for students and teachers. You've got to have a way to scout where to put those stationary Fab Labs. Because the downside of a mobile Fab Lab is you can't be everywhere at one time. You can visit a lot of places. Your range is greater, your footprint is greater, but how long you stay at those places is confined. So a two-pronged approach, eventually they want to start giving funds to schools in order so that they can start building their own Fab Labs to do the same things you did when you were there with the mobile Fab Lab. In order to do that, the Brilliant Career Lab and other mobile Fab Labs serve as scouts out there finding schools that understand project-based learning. They understand how to integrate the tools. They were excited and energized and are trying to do some of these things on their own. That's where you put your funds. That's where grant writing comes in. That's where outside organizations come in. And that's one of the things we had with the Brilliant Career Lab with GE. So transformation comes when the schools change and the system changes, and no other way. So, okay, I believe I've got about 7 minutes here. If I can get my slide to change here. Okay, so I will speak to
Ryan.
Yes.
There is another question. Would you prefer to go through the slides or to answer the question?
Give me just a moment and I'll get that question. I'm going to bounce through these slides and then we're going to go to questions. Most recently, I worked with a private school in New Orleans, Louisiana. And there was some, and there are private schools in every community, probably worldwide. So I wanted to speak briefly about the experience there and what you can do for private schools. Private schools need the same thing that public schools do. They just need it in different ways. And it's the same things we've been talking about. If I can flip my flexibility is really important for private schools. So when they look at relevance, they're looking for flexibility. They're looking to be able to use the Fab Lab, and they often have the funds to get a Fab Lab. They often have the funds to get a mobile Fab Lab, but they want it to be good at more than one thing. They want to be able to use it for a variety of things. And those things are instruction, outreach, and recruitment. Second, engagement. In my opinion, at a private school, they are more interested in experiences over curriculum because they do not have a system or a state that is evaluating them on curricular goals. They are evaluated by their students and by their parents. And so they're trying to provide unique experiences for those students, and Fab Labs can give them that. They're looking for outreach. They're trying to find ways that our students can go out in the community, and that is a way of empowering those students to have something to offer to the communities around them, because private schools by nature tend to be a little insular. It's their small community, and they want to get outside of that, and that's where a mobile Fab Lab owned by a private school can be powerful. And lastly, they're looking for transformation, and by transformation they mean an edge. If a private school can do something really innovative, all of the other private schools are forced to follow them. Otherwise, they lose recruitment. So partnering with a Fab Lab, partnering with makers, if that is truly valuable and the students and parents see that as truly valuable, they would get more recruits, more students. And therefore, it pushes that change on the other schools and they come to the table too. So private schools can be a great lever for makers and for Fab Labs. Okay, I'm now going to go to questions, and in the background here, if I can get my screen to change, these are, to me, 5 questions that I'm not going to go over that you may want to ask yourself as you're creating strategy for going into the formal, traditional places of education in your communities. I hate to challenge you in this way, but I am. We cannot really say we're out to impact the world unless we go to where the world of children are. And that's in schools. We have to have some strategy, no matter where our maker program or our Fab Lab is located, as how to address the local schools. That is, as I said at the beginning of the argument, the beginning of change, and the end of change. So at this point, questions?
Okay, so the question is, what do you see as a solution to deal with the concerns of the teachers regarding the wide world of digital fabrication and not knowing some things, and therefore not being able to help children in some challenges?
That's a great question. And that's exactly what the teachers are going to say. And the answer to that is, don't worry about it, teachers. Your kids will lead. If we're I was on a session yesterday, we were talking about the importance of tutorials. If we're thoughtful about the software and machines that we are using, students can access and teachers can access and stand upon, they can piggyback on the experience. And this is where Fab Labs are so important. We can't hoard our knowledge. We need to create tutorials and lessons and put them online so that teachers can access them, but more importantly, so that students can access them. The students will quickly outstrip any capability their teachers have, even someone with experience like myself in Alethea. The students have the time and they have the interest to grab off that first encounter with digital fabrication, get its implications for what it can do for them academically and in their life, and go. And at that point, support them. Support their learning, because you can't keep up with it. Any other questions?
Could you talk about giving students leadership roles in these spaces? How can we get them to safely champion this work for schools?
That's an excellent question. Way back, and I would flip back if I could get my slide to work right, but on the slide that showed some pictures of the Brilliant Career Lab, you saw in the top left corner 3 young men around a 3D printer. That was the technical team for 3D printing at the school. That was it. 3 students. They figured it out. And they had a ROTC instructor who empowered them to do that and said, look, this is beyond me. I'm an old man, but it's not beyond you. And I will support you all with your learning, but and I will give you time after school. You can make your own personal projects, things like that. But in return, I want you to be the tech team. I want you to be able to fix these 3D printers. I want you to be able to show teachers how to use the 3D printers, other students how to use the 3D printers. And in my 3 weeks at the school, probably the most important thing I did was work with that tech team and get them up to speed on how to work their 3D printer, how to maintenance it, and how to teach others. And from there, it spread exponentially. They taught other teachers, they taught other students, and it was off like wildfire. But you cannot effectively implement this into a school without letting the students lead. And administrators need to say to teachers, relax, let the students lead when it comes to technology. They're way better at it than you are.
Okay, Brian, I don't think that there's any other questions, and I included your contact information if
Great.
people want to connect with you.
Sounds great. Thank you so much for joining us, and go make a difference in your local schools. They need you. They need you. Go for it, especially this fall. Oh my goodness, this fall. Go help them. They need you. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.